So if I had to like bet on it,
Mm.
I think it would be 50-50, but I would slightly lean towards Bayern will probably sign Woltemade.
Yeah. Well, do you know the other interesting thing, which doesn't really help Bayern's case at all either? They haven't really seriously been in for anyone else. I mean, I know
Mm-hmm.
they've been linked with every single left winger in the world this summer, and eventually got Luis Diaz. But in terms of actual players like Voltemada can play that kind of hybrid role, number 10, striker, left winger, there hasn't really been any serious attempt for them to look at other options. And obviously, that doesn't help them on the negotiating table if they're just going to turn and say, "Well, this is the only guy we want to sign." Which means Stuttgart said, "Well, if he's on, if if the demand for him is so high, then that means we can put the price up as high as we want as well." Because we were talking about there's been a somewhat predictable story this week saying that Bayern have decided to go in for Christopher Nkunku, and yeah, and listeners who listen to the main show will know that that's probably extremely unlikely. And again, probably some pretty carefully planned what's the word I'm looking for?
Good, well-placed story, Stefan.
Yeah, I'll put it that way. From a club who are desperate to sell said player. But that's a good example of like we've seen constant, very speculative reports for Bayern in terms of trying to fill this position, but nothing concrete, and that doesn't help Bayern either. Bayern should be looking for 3 players like Voltemada, just in case they can't get this over the line, because not only does it mean they've got a fallback, but it also helps them in terms of negotiations, because they can turn around to Stuttgart and say, you know what, keep Voldemada, we'll go out and sign, Gonzalo Ramos from PSG for 40 million euros or something like that, and it means that they can, it gives them far stronger negotiating place, but they haven't done that. And as you said, it seems as though this window is going to end with either Bayern getting Voldemada or Bayern not getting Nick Voldemada, and very little in between.
So I have an interesting question for you. Who was the German footballer of the year this year?
Florian Wirth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Bayern Munich tried to sign him.
Yeah.
Did everything in their power. They would have
Which, by the way, it feels like it was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, would have broken their transfer record. They would have paid 140 million euros. They would have done it. Yeah. If they now say they wouldn't have, that's a lie. They would have paid 140 million euros. They would have done it. They would have paid him everything he wanted. They would have done it. Who's the second placed in the German footballer of the year? He's not German.
Xavi Simons? No.
He plays for Bayern.
Olise.
Yeah. Okay, who's third?
Musiala?
No. Nick Woltemade.
Right. So you think that's just what they've done? They've just gone through that list?
No, so here's the thing with Bayern Munich. Nick Woltemade is the most talked about German national team player because he's a German national team player. He played in the Nations League. He played in both games, right? And then went back to U21 to play that tournament. That was part of the deal that Woltemade made with Julian Nagelsmann that if he plays the Nations League, he's still allowed to play the U21, where he had an outstanding tournament. Him and Harvey Elliott were the 2 best players at that tournament. And Nick Woltemade has been the most talked about German international other than Florian Wirth. Bayern Munich failed to sign Florian Wirth in the most spectacular fashion. They got themselves a bloody nose. They were not financially beaten by a competitor. They were beaten based on reputation by Liverpool. That is a fact. That is how the story went. Anyone who tells you otherwise is Bayern Munich propaganda. They did not lose out on this deal financially. In fact, Wirtz would have made more money at Bayern Munich than he is now making in Liverpool. Those are facts. So how do you repair that reputation? You sign the other most talked about German national team player. Neither Florian Wirtz or Nick Woltemade make sense for you positionally. We're talking about a club that sees itself as being the club where the German national team players play. Nick Woltemade is the most talked about German national team player other than Florian Wirtz at the moment. This isn't about need, this is about want and about prestige. And Bayern Munich cannot afford to lose this battle as well. This is what it comes down to.
Yeah. So,
and from their standpoint, I personally don't think it's the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that's where they're coming from.
the day after they sign him, man, we'll have to do a podcast saying how the hell did they fit Nick Woltemade into the starting 11?
It's not going to be a problem until Musiala comes back.
Well, yeah, but that's still a big problem though in the future, you know.
Yeah.
But
then Luis Diaz will be hurt, and Musiala has to play on the left.
yeah. Oh well, yeah, and then that starts the whole transfer saga about him wanting to leave to play Real Madrid or Barcelona or something.
Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely right, and it goes back to what I was saying about the perception around the club, the public relations around the club, the fear of the great horde of Bayern fans at the gate, not content with how things are. And you know, it reminds me of like the movie Gladiator, and it's like you know, when like the senator says something like, you know, Rome is the horde, or it's the people in the stands crying for murder and things. Not to get too dramatic, but that's what Bayern Munich are as well, you know, and that's why they're called FC Hollywood, because if they don't have a strong person in charge, if they don't have a strong personality leading that club, they very quickly descend into doing what they think will win them a popularity contest. And as you said, Florian Wirth would win them a popularity contest, and now they're convinced Nick Woltemade would win them a popularity contest. And we'll have to wait and see whether they sign them, and it's going to make for a really interesting game, especially if he plays, especially if he scores. But it's it's just classic FC Hollywood, isn't it?